Good afternoon and welcome to Meet the Candidates Forum for Stonebridge HOA Board of Directors. My name is Bob Henry. I'm president of the current board and chairman of the nominating committee that has the responsibility to oversee and coordinate the annual election of the directors. Other members of the committee are Carolyn Boning, Dan Graziano, Hal Hills, and Tom Vizioli. Collectively, the five of us have 41 years of volunteer service in support of Stonebridge. Keep your head down. As a reminder, please silence all of your cell phones. If you have not already done so, please pick up a copy of the candidates' information, but I think most people got it on their way in. There will be a question and answer portion of today's forum, and we hope that the candidate information will trigger some audience questions. First, let me review today's format. This forum is not a debate, as the candidates will be addressing their comments to the audience and not to each other. All of the candidates were provided 5 potential questions 2 weeks ago to give them time to prepare clear and thoughtful responses. We collected the written responses and will have them available for you on the website for your reference. Proceeding in alphabetical order, each candidate will begin with a 2-minute opening statement to introduce themselves. I will then pose 2 of the prepared questions to the candidates, and they will have up to 5 minutes to respond. The first question will be answered in alphabetical order, and the second will be in reverse alphabetical order. There will then be a Q&A period for the audience, so if you wish to ask a question, please line up at the microphone here in the center. State your name, your question, and to whom you wish to direct your question. I will ask that your question be no longer than 15 seconds and it not be a duplicate of a question that was previously asked of a candidate. The candidates will then have 5 minutes to respond. Then, proceeding in reverse alphabetical order, each candidate will have 2 minutes to deliver a closing comment. I will then deliver some brief final comments, and the forum will then conclude. Before we begin, let me briefly review the election process. On December 1st, a notice was sent to all members soliciting candidates for the 3 soon-to-be open board positions. By the deadline on December 17th, 5 members self-nominated themselves by submitting their notice of intent to run for the board. On January 9th, 1 member was nominated by petition, which brings us to the 6 candidates who are running for the board. On January 18th, the nominating committee sent our recommendation to the members, as required by our governing documents, recommending 4 of the 6 candidates who have a strong track record of volunteer service to Stonebridge. The election will begin tomorrow and conclude at the annual member meeting on February 27th. Vote Now, the company that coordinates the election for us, including the handling of the electronic voting, will be emailing online voting instructions and proxy ballots to members tomorrow. Shortly thereafter, all members will also receive a paper proxy in the mail. Online voting will end at 5 p.m. the day before the annual member meeting, so that Vote Now can tabulate the results and provide a report on the day of the meeting. Members may also vote in person at the beginning of the annual meeting with a paper ballot. Voting will be closed shortly after the beginning of that meeting. Then during the annual meeting, in-person paper ballot votes will be tabulated and added to the voting results from Vote Now, and the election results will be announced at the end of the meeting. And remember, only 1 vote, either electronic or paper ballot, per household. While the actual voting begins tomorrow, the election process that began on December 1st has already been very unusual in that there have been a number of Stonebridge firsts. For the first time in Stonebridge history, a member submitted their self-nomination after the deadline, so it was rejected on advice of counsel. For the first time, a member was nominated by petition, and not surprisingly, it's the same member who submitted their self-nomination late. For the first time in its history, the nominating committee did not recommend all of the candidates, since 2 members are running for the board without any prior volunteer service to Stonebridge on either a board committee or in a neighborhood leadership position. As detailed in the January 18th recommendation letter to the members, the nominating committee considers prior Stonebridge volunteer service and an understanding and commitment to our governance model as an essential qualifier for anyone who seeks to serve on the board. And finally, for the first time ever, as you can see from today's panel, a candidate decided to run for the board knowing that they couldn't attend today's forum to introduce himself and answer your questions. Cliff Keyser is on an extended vacation to Australia and New Zealand that he scheduled before deciding to run for the board, and he apologizes for not being here. He asked me if I would read a statement to you today, and I told him that it would depend on the statement's content. When he sent his statement to me, it went beyond explaining his absence, and it got into policy issues. Therefore, I've communicated to him, even though he's already left town, that I can't read his statement for two reasons. First, since he is not here to answer any questions about his policy statements, it's not fair to the other candidates who are here and will answer your questions. Second, he makes a statement in the statement that he sent to me that is the exact opposite of what he told the committee during his interview on January 3rd. Since both statements can't be true, and he's not here to explain the discrepancy, it's not appropriate to read his statement. The three current board members whose term expires at the annual member meeting are Jan Fern, Ellen Hannon, and myself. The six candidates who will be on the ballot for the three open positions in alphabetical order are Jim Carroll, Henry Dutzman, Gail Fisher, Cliff Keyser, Don Prosigan, and Tom Pinkerton. So with that, let's begin. We will begin with the opening comments, and we will start with Jim Carroll.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks everybody for coming today and for giving me an opportunity to make my case for being elected to the Board of Directors for Stonebridge. I have already heard from a number of my golfing buddies and tennis friends and others, and I can assure you, as I assured them, that I'll do the best job that I can. Patty and I first fell in love with Stonebridge about 6 years ago and began to rent in Carrington. We started renting for 3 months, and then we started renting for 6 months, and then we bought a condo and stayed for 8 months, and then finally we took the dive and we bought a house down here, sold our Pittsburgh home, and we've been full-time residents for 3 years. It's the best decision we've made in a long time. I've always felt a responsibility, frankly, to give back to my community whenever I can. I served on the board of the United Way of Allegheny County in Pittsburgh for a long time. Throughout my career as a banker, I served on the board and was oftentimes president of banking trade groups. And I also worked on a number of nonprofit boards in the areas of the arts, education, and community development. So I have some hands-on experience of dealing with volunteer organizations and volunteer boards. But probably the most important experiences I've had is that I had served on 2 boards that were homeowner association boards back in Pittsburgh, and I can tell you that that gives me a very healthy dose of experience on how to deal with a homeowners association board. And after becoming a full-time resident, I joined 2 committees here at Stonebridge. One is Community Standards Committee, and one is the Strategic Planning Committee. So I have a great dose of information about them. With that, I've been told by Hal that I have to stop talking because he's got a quick thing here, and we'll give it to Hal. Henry.
Good afternoon. I'm Henry Hank Dutzman, running for the board, and I think Stonebridge is a wonderful place to live. I have no issues with the day-to-day operation. I believe that Tim Jones is doing a wonderful job as general manager in operating Stonebridge. My time as mayor for 6 years and on the city council prior to that for 8 years, I'm used to receiving the agenda and information on what issues are before the Stonebridge board. And I think with meeting with Tim, if I'm elected, I can bring a fresh face to Stonebridge. The issues as I see them, is that we are presently paying for this building. I do not think we should have a moratorium on future capital improvements until we have paid off that debt. I also believe that it's good to have committees and a plan for the future of Stonebridge. But I believe that the owners of Stonebridge should approve that capital improvement. Therefore, I would look forward to working to see that the owners have a vote. That may take a couple of years because the board has changed the bylaws, and I would like to work to see that if this was a homeowners association, I've been told that a vote would be needed to be made. But not being a homeowners association, the board has changed the bylaws and can go ahead with certain projects that I think the homeowners should be able to vote on. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the nominating committee for the opportunity to address my Stonebridge neighbors and friends. I am really honored to be here. I would like to ask for your support of my candidacy for the board of directors. I'm an original owner in Ashton Oaks. My husband Tom and I love Stonebridge, we love the community, and we plan to be here for as long as we are able. I spent most of the last 20 years up north working in strategic brand development in the pharmaceutical industry, working with high-performing cross-functional teams. Now, I learned a lot while working in a team environment. It allowed me to observe and appreciate the talents and skills of others, of which there are many. I learned that there is often more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak, and that you can constructively challenge others, resolve conflicts, and achieve success. I was able to do work that made a difference, and I love doing really good, meaningful work. Which brings me to my interest in service on the board. Over the next 3 to 5 years, it appears that we will need to work together and decide as a community where we want to go, build a plan to achieve the goals we've set, and implement it. Believe it or not, the oldest Gen Xers turned 55 in 2020, and we will need to consider this demographic profile as we move forward to the future. At the same time, we will need to provide continuity of amenities and services that we have all come to enjoy and love, while integrating any new agreed upon changes or modifications. I am confident that my past has led me to develop the skill set that will help us navigate the process, be a collaborative board member, while representing collective views of neighbors. Thank you for your consideration.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Parsican. My wife Gabby and I have lived in Stonebridge since 2010. For the past 4+ years, Gabby has been a full-time resident here. And during that time, I have spent between 7 to 9 months in Stonebridge. Not a full-time resident because I had family commitments, and I was on the board of the Normandy Beach Yacht Club during that 5 years. During my career, I have served on various boards, both for-profit and not-for-profit, and most recently with the Normandy Beach Yacht Club for the past 5 years. One of the things that the nominating committee was looking for was board experience. I don't have board experience in Stonebridge, but I do have board experience with the Normandy Beach Yacht Club. I was on the social committee, the budget committee, the buildings and ground committee, the communications committee, the kitchen committee, the adult and junior sailing program committees, and the race committee. In 2017, I was the club commodore with responsibility for all social events and the calendar. During the year I was commodore, we expanded the bar service from beer and wine to full-service bar and pub-style food. We also expanded operating hours and days. And we implemented a point-of-sale system and saw an increase in membership of 15%. So I think I have a little bit of experience on boards outside of Stonebridge. In the past year, members of the Stonebridge community that I know have asked me to become involved with the Stonebridge board. As my family commitments in New Jersey And with the yacht club winding down, I've decided to focus my time and energy to support the members of the Stonebridge community to become involved with the Stonebridge board. I'd like to thank everybody who signed my petition. I did run my petition. You're required to get a minimum of 10%. In a week's time, I got 20% of the members to sign my petition. And I'd like to thank everybody for that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Pinkerton. Betsy and I have been members of Stonebridge for about 15 years, first in Willow Bend, and about the last 5 years we've been in Braeburn. We live here 6 months of the year. The other 6 months we're back home in Massachusetts. From a career point of view, I was a mid-level manager at GE for 37 years in sales, marketing, and operations. Feel very fortunate to be down here and participate in golf, tennis, and all the social activities that are made available to us. Been on the Golf and Greens Committee here for the last 4 years and got a sense of how that operation works. I certainly appreciate this opportunity to run for the board. I think my main goal would be to try to listen and hear what the membership has to say, and then try to convert that into a positive voice on the board itself, trying to make the right decisions for our club. I think we all know this is a great spot, and we're all lucky to be here, and I'd like to work towards our continued success. Thanks.
Hey, could you pass it back to Jim? Okay. Thank you all. Now we will go to the questions, and as I mentioned, these questions, they were given 2 weeks ahead of time, so they have prepared remarks for this. So the first question will go to Jim Carroll, and it'll be question number 1. Jim, what do you think are the most important characteristics we should look for in a great board member, and why do you want to be on the board?
Thanks, Bob. Well, I guess a great board member is someone who's capable of serving as a responsible and trustworthy member, representing the needs and wants of all the Stonebridge residents, both now and in the future. It certainly would be helpful for this person to have some understanding of how the volunteer organizations like Stonebridge are expected to operate. And also, the more this person understands the specific challenges that we face and the opportunities that we face as residents of Stonebridge, the better. As for me, I've always felt a responsibility to give back to the community, and as I said, I worked on a number of nonprofit organizations. And with regard to the 2 homeowner associations that I worked on, the first one was a mature organization that was having financial problems, and we were able to turn that around in a couple of years. The second one was a brand new homeowners association, and we focused very hard on trying to get to make the transition from when the developer ran everything to when the homeowners ran everything. Tried to make that transition as smooth as possible. And frankly, I just would like to give back to the community since I've been here for 3 years full-time, served on the Community Standards Committee with Tony as chairman, who's actually done a terrific job, and on the Strategic Planning Committee with Larry. And so we love it here, and I'd like to give something back. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you, Jim. The next question is for Henry Dutzman. It's question number 4. Henry, what is the biggest challenge facing Stonebridge today, and how would you address it as a board member?
Well, as I sent in on the information that I gave you, I believe the biggest challenge today is the capital improvement campaign being planned. I believe, and I'm part of a group that believes these capital improvements are not necessary at this time until we've paid off the debt that we've incurred on this building. However, having stated that, I'm not prepared to make a decision for the 799 homeowners of Stonebridge. Voting for or against these improvements will have a direct impact on the finances and membership dues increasing on the footprint of Stonebridge. So while I hold an opinion, as do others on the board who may disagree with my opinion, I believe the decision for these capital improvements should be made by the homeowners and not the board. As a board member, I would fight for allowing the 799 owners a chance to vote on capital improvements and on approving and denying the changes of Stonebridge footprint. I believe we should allow a vote. I'm not in the business of selling, and I would respect whatever that vote and work toward the helping, if they approve the plan, moving it forward.
Thank you, Henry. The next question will go to Gail Fisher. And Gail, it's question number 2. What 2 board committees do you feel best prepared to chair next year and why?
Thank you. The 2 committees that I think I would be best prepared to work on would be the Strategic Planning Committee and the Communication IT Committee. I'll share with you why. I've been on the Strategic Planning Committee here for the last 2 years, so I'm pretty grounded and comfortable with that process and what's going on. In my past life of doing strategic brand development, strategic planning, usually of 5 to 7 years, although 7 years is pretty far out to try to strategic plan when you always have crises come up and things enter marketplaces that may alter you to change your plan. But I did an incredible year after year for many, many years, 20 years. I helped build a startup company in pharmaceuticals after I retired from Lilly. So we built a strategic plan around that as well. So I feel very comfortable in the strategic planning process itself. As a matter of fact, I got on the strategic planning committee because when the new plan came out, I tried to interpret what I thought it was and maybe summarize it, and I sent some suggestions to Tim as to how he might make some changes or just a few things on it. And as a result of that, I was asked to join the Strategic Planning Committee, so be careful what you wish for and what you do. But anyways, I did, and I've really enjoyed it. It's allowed me to have a chance to meet other people in the community too, which has been great since I haven't spent the majority of the last 20 years here. And then with the IT, communications IT, part of my job in strategic brand development was managing around all the communications related to a brand, including crisis management. So internal communications, external communications. So I know there is a process that's going on to pick a new vendor, and I've also been involved in vendor selection, so I'm very familiar with those processes. So I think these are the 2 committees I would be pretty well prepared to handle.
All right, thank you, Gail. Next question is for Don. It's question number 5. Don, tell us your concept of strategic planning and how it relates to Stonebridge and your responsibility as a board member.
Like, as far as strategic plans go, as Gail just said, I think we have to constantly review and update the strategic plans that we have. One of the things that you do is you don't put it out there in concrete and don't look at it again, you just follow it. Things are always changing, people's tastes are always changing. Conditions like the hurricane coming in here have changed things and the way we want to do things. I was just invited to be on the committee that's looking at making some modifications or enhancements to the golf course. So these are things that we're looking at doing and constantly reviewing and changing. I think that's very important. The strategic plan, I think, first define who we are and what do we want to be. Are we a country club? Are we a homeowners association? What do we expect? What are we trying to do? I know a lot of this is already spelled out in the strategic plan. These are the things I'm talking about. And what is important? What is important to the members, I think, is very important to get there. There was a big meeting here at the end of the year last year, end of the season, I should say, last year, and a lot of people came up and spoke their opinions against what was being said, and a lot of people were talking about the support. So there's a lot of changes out there, and I think we, as a community, and we as board members or committee members have to take a look at that and understand what everybody's talking about and roll that into the strategic plan. It can't just be a document that flows. It has to have the full involvement of the community. And I think the community needs to have input on that.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Don. And the last person on the first question is Tom Pinkerton. And Tom, your question is number 1. Repeat with Jim. What do you think are the most important characteristics we should look for in a great board member, and why do you want to be on the board?
Probably the biggest thing is for that candidate to be a listener. In all kinds of board level decisions, the key thing, as Don was just talking about, was input from the members. We need to make sure that our board members are listening, hearing what we're saying, and then taking that to the board and sharing it, advocating, not advocating, but certainly listening to what the various opinions are. Compromise, due diligence, all that goes in to making the right decisions for the club in the long term. Commitment to our vision and member statement, or mission statements are important things. Are we thinking of those in terms of the decisions that we make? And I think our ability to examine, do the due diligence, and then come to a viable solution that we can recommend to the board and to the membership. Why do I want to be a board member? I think it's, Jim said it best at the beginning, we all live here, we all want to contribute. This is a great opportunity for me to share what skills I do have with this community, and I think it's as simple as that.
All right, thank you, Tom. You can pick the microphone back up again. We're going to keep going. Okay, the second question to each of the candidates, and we're going to start in reverse order, will be with Tom. And it's question number 4. So, Tom, what is the biggest challenge facing Stonebridge today, and how would you address it as a board member?
You know, I think to me the biggest challenge we have is to remain current. We are a 20-year plus old community, staying up to date with all the things that you see getting built out on Mockley Road, the thinking that is going in there. We have got one thing that nobody else has around here. We have a great location. We have a small footprint, but we can keep that footprint current, and that can keep our market values as they should be. It can keep a younger generation of buyers interested in a piece of property like this. So I think keeping current is the biggest thing that we have to make plans for. And obviously that, we talk about the strategic plan. I think that's probably the whole point of the strategic plan, is to make sure that we balance the needs of us right here and now who are living and enjoying this spot with the needs of the people who will be here 10 years from now enjoying this spot. And I would think that that's probably our biggest challenge.
All right. Thank you, Tom. John, it's question number 3. In serving the entire community as a board member, how would you negotiate the opposing views that are held by member groups within Stonebridge and develop a consensus between them?
Well, I don't know if a consensus is possible on all topics. But the first thing I would do is continue the surveys that Stonebridge has been doing in the past on hot topics. And I understand there's a survey coming out again in about 2 weeks' time. I'm not quite sure what all the questions will be, but I'm sure some of them will be on some of the hot topics, or at least I hope they will be on the hot topics, so the members can look at it, vote on it, and answer to that survey and get their points across. I think that's the most important part of being a board member, is listening to what the members have to say and trying to understand how we make that work. It's not an easy thing to do. There are always alternatives, but I think we have to consider what everybody thinks about all the time, and we have to support members' input. The survey is one way to start it, but I also think when we get into big town hall meetings, when members talk and they have opposing views, they have to be considered. I think they were considered last year. I'm not quite sure where we're going. I know some people may not know. Just for instance, I was not at the Thornbrook meeting, but you got up and spoke, Bob, at the Thornbrook meeting and talked about making modifications to the gatehouses on Airport and Mockley. That was the first time I had heard about it after coming out of the meeting. So I think we have to get more people communicating to that when we're doing things, not keep it quiet. Now, I'm not saying you kept it quiet. I'm just saying, I don't think it was broadcast to the whole community so they could see it. So I think those are some of the things we have to work on.
All right. Thank you, Don. Gail, your question is number 5. Tell us your concept of strategic planning and how it relates to Stonebridge and your responsibility as a board member.
I think I touched on a little bit of it in the last question, but strategic planning usually involves a 3 to 5 year plan. As I said, we used to do 7-year plans, and then it just got kind of, not at Stonebridge, but in my work life, it got a little crazy to try to figure out how the world was going to be seven years out in such a changing dynamic market that we were working in. So we really scaled back to 3 to 5 years with really a focus on a 3-year plan, and that's what we do here at Stonebridge, looking out to some of the things that might be relevant over 7 years' time, some of the improvements and things, but really focused on the day-to-day activities of implementing what gets done on an annual, daily, monthly basis. They're really created to support the mission and vision of an organization. When I did brand development, we developed a brand position, which means what's the position you want to occupy in the market that you can, that nobody else can occupy. Maybe a little different when you're talking about some country club environments, but and we would only change our position when something happened in the market that would knock you out of that position. So that's how we looked at it. So it's a plan that's done to create and support the mission and vision of this organization, which we do have a mission, vision, and a slogan, which is nice. We would develop critical success factors around there. What are the things, three to five things that absolutely that need to happen in order to create your vision and plan? And then develop specific objectives and specific action plans around them. And we would always do SMART objectives. They have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be actionable, they have to be timely, and you have to be able to, they have to achieve a result. It's not just like we want to update the front of the, the signs out in the front. They have to have a time associated to that, etc. When you want to achieve things, accomplish things, you have to be able to measure them and go back and look at it. And I think if you go back and look at the strategic plan, if you've ever had a chance to review it, all of it is covered in the Stonebridge plan, and we're now highlighting new activities. So if you want to just go and look and see what's the new things the board or that Tim's group has implemented in the last year or added to the plan, you can go and see them. And then there's areas that are grayed out that show we've completed it. So just say, these are things we want to do that are complete. The board reviews this on at least an annual basis. The planning committee also reviews it. And they have to approve, the board has to approve the plan and any modifications to the plan. So once it's there, it's kind of set in stone unless there's a need to go back and change it. And I think that Don touched on this, but the strategic plan is a living document. So you don't just do it and say, oh, I got this done for this year and just go put it up on the shelf. So as a member of the board, I would consider myself a steward of the plan, and to make sure that, when the reviews happen on time, that as you think about things that might be impacting the plan, it would be our obligation to bring it forward so that we could make the necessary modifications and add them or edit the plan to remove them if they no longer apply.
All right, thank you, Gail. Next question is for Henry. It's question number 3. Henry, in serving the entire community as a board member, how would you negotiate the opposing views that are held by member groups within Stonebridge and develop a consensus between them?
Well, you people will receive it later, but as stated in the opening question, I believe the 3 most important characteristics of a great board member is someone who is willing to listen, ask pertinent questions, to fully understand the issues, and is competent to make a final decision after listening to both sides. Therefore, in dealing and negotiating with communities of opposing viewpoints, I would first listen and ask questions to the community members. After doing so and forming an opinion, I would explain the issue as I see it and tell them why I support my position. As I am elected to the board, I will ultimately cast my vote to make the decisions, though I would base my vote and support on the input of the community members. I also am not one to say that I know what the community wants, but I rather think the community should have a voice in decisions that impact them greatly, such as capital improvements. If a decision such as this needs to be made, I believe Stonebridge should have a vote, as I've stated earlier.
All right, thank you, Henry. And the last person for the second question is Jim. Jim, it's question number 4. What is the biggest challenge facing Stonebridge today, and how would you address it as a board member?
Well, after living here for 6 years and having served on community standards as well as strategic planning, I feel our challenges really actually are 2, and they're both of equal value. The first, we must preserve and enhance the value of all the investments made by all Stonebridge members. Simply stated, we need to know what we are getting and is it worth the price. Is this the way we want to live, or should it be better? And if so, what does that mean and how are you going to do it? Secondly, and just as important, we must continue to research and implement ways to keep Stonebridge competitive with other communities throughout the Naples area. And we must take the appropriate steps to keep Stonebridge attractive to potential buyers, all the while not ignoring the needs of those of us who are here today. As a strategic planning committee member, I've already become immersed in a lot of the things that we are undertaking in order to understand how complex this is when you have to measure the communities similar to us, whether our actions today will help preserve this wonderful paradise or not. So it's a difficult challenge, but both of those things are very, very important.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So thank you to all of you for your thoughtful answers. It's now time for the member question and answer period. So if you would like to ask a question, please line up at the microphone here, state your name, briefly ask your question, and state who you would like to answer your question. And is the microphone on?
Yes.
Perfect.
I'm Gary Wagner. My wife Kathy and I have lived in Middlebrook for about more than 21 years. We bought under construction. I have a question. Actually, I have 3 questions. One for each, or for each of the board members. And what are you waiting for?
Yeah, okay.
How would you like to get handled?
Good.
Do you want me to sit down?
No. Answer your question. Ask your question.
Stop waving that at me. Do you commit to letting the members vote in any non-emergency expenditures over a reasonable amount? And it needs no more than a yes or no answer.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Second question, what do you think a reasonable expenditure for the, you want me to sit down? What do you think a reasonable expenditure vote for member voting should be?
Well, I think frankly that depends upon.
I think that depends, frankly, upon the subject matter itself, the particular situation. The board, as I understand it, in August of last year, passed a resolution setting a particular dollar amount over which a membership vote is mandated. But the nature of the project is going to dictate really whether or not you need to have an informal vote or a formal vote or not. So it's a tough question to answer that way, except there is something on the books already.
And finally, do you commit to pursuing a change in the bylaws and covenants that would assure the members will have a vote on any reasonable non-emergency expenditure? Jim? I'm asking each, yes or no.
In addition to what's already on the books?
A change in the bylaws to allow us members to vote unreasonable.
If it comes up as a discussion item, we certainly would discuss it and find out what the pros and cons are and take the appropriate action.
Henry?
I do not know what the money amount, I have no thought on that at this time. Is changing the bylaws, yes, I would work to change the bylaws to allow a vote on capital improvement.
Gail?
I think Jim was referring to it was changed to 20% above the master assessments and the base dues. Is that correct? I think that number is somewhere about $12 to $1,500, Dan?
Correct.
Right. So I guess the question becomes, what items do, so that's a change in the bylaws. If people want to vote on things that cost $500, or, I mean, I think Tim has discretion now to approve anything that's a capital expenditure up to $25,000 for the club, because it became expenses that were needed to improve things at the club or replace things would have to come up for a vote every time you wanted to spend more than $5,000. So if it's if people are talking about you want to be able to vote on an amount of an assessment for less than $1,500, I would consider it. But the bylaws has been changed to that amount. So just I probably a lot of people aren't aware of it.
No, I certainly wasn't.
Right.
Ron? I think members should have a vote if it's non-emergent and it's going to result in an assessment. You know, after the hurricane, there were assessments made, but they were emergency assessments, and I had no problem with that. The bylaw change that I think is being referred to or discussed here at the table right now or on the floor says that the board basically can spend that 20% with or without approval of the members. They have the discretion to, if they want to ask the members either formally or informally to vote on it. So if that's what you're talking about, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, I would propose that that would be a formal vote if it goes up to that 20% limit. But again, if it's going to result in an assessment, I think the members should have a vote on it.
Tom?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, operational efficiency requires that there be some reasonable threshold that
Yes.
someone like Tim can do business so that we can move on day by day. And, you know, if the number isn't, the 20% number isn't right, then the board can certainly look at what the right number is.
Thank you.
I promise not to break into song.
Only if you play your guitar.
My question is for Don. During the event, I'm sorry, Peter Fleming, I live in Hawthorne. I've had a house here for about 21 years. Don, during the Irma event, which before, during, and after, there were a number of emails that were being sent around, particularly to find out who was here, who needed help, those kinds of things. You sent an email out, I don't remember if you responded to that list, but you sent an email out talking about how you thought the performance of the board and management was poor, that it was a poor performance for Irma. Do you still feel that way, and can you explain why?
Well, I lived here through it, as you did. And I think we formed a committee after that. And a lot of the reasons why the committee was formed after that was because of what happened during Irma and the things we learned. So I think the board and some of the leadership at that point in time, members, were going through the process for the first time. I think after the storm there was good communication, but I'm not sure if there was good communication before. There were places that, in Middleburg, for example, and other places that I heard about where furniture was flying all over the place off of Lanai because it wasn't secured. I think we could have done a better job as management and the board to get that stuff under control or communicate better with people. It did happen after the season, quote unquote, was over, so there weren't a lot of people here. Those are some of the things I'm talking about that should have been done. What was open, what wasn't open, can we get ice, can't we get ice? There was a generator. When you came up to use the generator wasn't working, wasn't available. We were told there was ice. When we came to get ice, there was no ice. The reason why there wasn't ice was because it was non-potable. I mean, there was all kinds of reasons of going back and forth. That group email was something I responded to, and everybody was responding to. It wasn't just me as an individual. There was probably 40 to 100 people on that email going back and forth. So I just made my comments at the time that I felt were appropriate, and I still think they were appropriate at that point in time. And I think we've done a lot to make changes to grow from that, primarily by the committee that you're chairing right now.
All right. Thank you, Don. Thanks.
My name is Andy Kent. I live in Middleburg, and I would just really like a yes or no from each board member. Do you feel that we should go ahead with any of these strategic planning ideas that have to do with expanding the driveway, the clubhouse, the bistro, whatever, before we have paid off the assessment for this clubhouse? Jim, or just go on down the line?
It seems certainly reasonable. My understanding is that those projects are on hold indefinitely.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, we've been told that, and then down the road, something else will happen. They're either on hold, we're not going to do them until this clubhouse is paid off.
I believe that. No, I would not support going ahead with those things.
One of the things,
Use the microphone, please.
You can't hear the response.
Well, the answer was no, I would not support moving ahead.
Thank you.
one of the things I learned as part of being on the Master Site Plan Committee was that it takes about 2 years from the day you decide to do something to even start doing it, because of the planning that has to go in, the draws of plan to get permission or whatever. So it's unlikely that anything major could start before then. And if it did, it would have to be, if it was a big project, on approval of the membership. We've already changed that in our bylaws, so I would not foresee that happening at this point in time. I think we do need, that's why I said we need to think about for the next 3 to 5 years where we want to go, because Collier County is very, very slow in approving anything, and they're very nitpicky about what you do. So we need to think about where we want to go and how we want to get there, because it's already 2019. You wouldn't even, if you wanted to do something today, it probably wouldn't start for at least 18 months to 2 years. So I think we can vote on it and see.
Thanks, Gary. Don?
To answer your question, I'm going to repeat myself. If it requires an assessment to the members, I don't think it should go on to the current assessment is paid off. I know there are other ways that you can get financing, you can do things, there are reserves, there's this, there's that, and everything else, but anytime you touch a reserve, it has to be replenished. My concern is adding assessments without having a member vote. And I think anytime there's going to be an assessment, non-emergent, that members should vote on it.
Thanks, Don.
And I think it's probably almost an item by item look, Andy. There are things that sometimes if you act now, it can be a great financial benefit to the club. There are other things that you're better off delaying. I think that the debt is going to be paid off. I think is it 2023 that debt is paid off, and as Gail said, it takes a long time to get anything to happen. So with the member voting on some threshold of number, I don't think we're in much danger of having duplicate assessments, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next.
My name is John Burnham. My wife and I have been residents, snowbirds to begin with, a longer time like everybody else, for the last 23 years. So we've been through the variety of changes and everything. Is it not true, and I'll ask Gail, because you're on the committee, and Jim, you're on the committee also, is it not true that we have submitted to the county the total package plan for their review, and we did this back in September, October, and we paid a fee of $45,000 for somebody to follow this up with?
Well, it wasn't, the committee did not do that. It was a board action, so I'll address that.
Okay.
And yes, in the August board meeting, the board decided to submit for what's called a site development plan amendment, which is a process you go through with the county to get feedback from the county on the various parts of the process. So we had more information So the board knew what issues that were going to come up if we decided at some point down the road to do them. The site development plan amendment is good for 10 years. So it doesn't mean that we're going to do anything. It just means we're trying to learn from the county what issues they may have if we ever decide to do an expansion of the parking lot or an enhancement of the bistro. So yes, that was done and it's almost complete.
The other part of it was if the...
Yeah, and that...
The other part of that was, let's pretend that the bulkhead is due to be redone right around where the bistro is in 2020 or 2022.
2022.
So let's pretend that bulkhead falls down next week. So if that is approved, that it could, because we had potentially talked about filling that in so we would have more space over there if you want to expand the pool or whatever. So if that falls down before it's destined to be replaced, then I'm sorry. Then we would have the option or the permission to go ahead and do that prior to when we had planned to if it fails.
You're saying the permission is granted by the county?
By the county.
Okay, which automatically at this point, you can generate up to $1,200,000 or $1,400,000 as an assessment.
Redoing the bulkhead, I believe, is in the
reserves.
The reserves in the plan.
So it's not part of the overall plan. I mean, the replacement of the bulkhead is one thing, but in conjunction with that, there's also the conversation was going to be is that we be putting a gazebo of some kind out into the water.
Yeah, there's no plan.
Oh, there's no plan. There's no plan in place for that.
There's no
it's
plan
just
for that.
specifically related to either moving the bulkhead out a little bit and filling in the land behind it.
Yeah, so what Gail's talking about is if it fails,
Repairing it.
and we decide that we have to replace it, which comes out of reserves, instead of replacing where it is, we may want to move it out a little bit so that we free up some land that we can sometime down in the future do something with it. But there's no plans to do that. That's if the bulkhead fails.
Well, I'll ask you then, as the president outgoing, I realize.
Sure.
But at this point in time, the residents have never physically actually voted for any of these improvements that have been proposed. Is that a fair statement?
That's an accurate statement, certainly.
Okay.
But none of them are being done either.
Well, will they be?
There's no plans to do anything. There's no plans to do anything at the moment. As Gail said, they're on hold, and there's no plans to implement any of that. What we did, and what the committee was tasked to do, was to build a plan for the future. They've done that. We now have a plan. There is no plan to implement anything in the near future. It's now a plan in a book, and we'll decide at some point in the future what to do.
But does the board have the authority, if it is approved by the county, then what happens? Without the membership here?
The board has the authority. Does the board have the authority to do it? Yes. But that doesn't mean the board is going to. Don't assume that the board is going to do something nefarious just because they can. In your terms. So don't assume that.
I may not be the only one assuming that in this room.
Okay, but...
No, I thank you.
Sure. Do I get seconds? No one else seems to want to come up?
I'm real confused about this expenditure. I thought I asked, at what point in expenditures do the members get a vote? And I heard Gail say something about $2,500 or $25,000 or something like that, which I just shook my head because that isn't what I think I heard at the meeting in the spring. And I think I heard at the meeting in the spring that the board has the right to do pretty much anything they want as long as they vote on it. So without the membership coming up for improvement. So, you know, the $2,500 or $5,000 or what, you know, we spent $45,000 apparently, and I think some additional monies to put this plan into effect. And I think John's question was, do we get a vote at the point in time that monies are committed, contracts are signed, or do we not?
Okay, so let me be very clear. And I know this is supposed to be a candidates forum, but you're not asking questions of the candidates that they can answer. So I will answer. In the spring, what I said was that based on the governing documents that existed and still exist, the board can approve any capital project pretty much unlimited dollar amount. That's what the governing documents say. You may not like that, but that's what the governing documents say. In August, the board passed a policy, and this is what we're referring to here. It's not a change to the bylaws. So it's a policy that says anything over the 20% of our dues, if we do a capital project that exceeds that amount, it must go to a member vote. So we've limited the board's authority by putting this policy in place in August. Anything over 20% is by board policy will go to a member vote. But we're not trying to implement anything. So there's nothing to vote on yet.
Okay, then I will rephrase my question number 2. I thought I asked the candidates for the board if they would commit to changing the bylaws or covenants or whatever that would require, not a policy that can be changed in any board meeting, but if they are committed to changing the bylaws to where we, the membership, have a vote on expenditures, and you have to come up with the right number. And I thought I asked that question, and I thought everybody said yes. You still say yes, that we're committed to changing the covenants and or bylaws where it's required that we have a vote, as opposed to policy of the board, which can be changed at most any time.
What's the threshold?
The threshold, I had put down 250,000. I don't know whether that's a good threshold or not, and I would assume that if you're committed to making those bylaw change where we as members feel that we have some say in this, that if 250,000 is wrong, then you can come up with a different number, you know, a reasonable number.
So I guess the question is, if, for a number that you think is reasonable, would you commit to changing the bylaws as opposed to it being a board policy?
Yes.
Is it going to first or?
Oh, anyway, you can say.
I'll answer it because I have the microphone, and then I'll pass it along. I think I've stated a couple times this afternoon that I would make a change to the bylaws if it was going to require an assessment on the members. I think if the members are going to be assessed, and it's non-emergent, I'm not talking like with a hurricane where it had to happen and it had to be taken care of, that's completely different. And the board should have that discretion. And they did, and they took care of it. But non-emergent, I think the membership should have a vote on it. And I think the documents right now are saying that the board could do what they want up to $1 million and change, whatever the number is. It could change from year to year. But again, hard numbers might be difficult depending on what you're talking about, but if it's going to result in an assessment to the membership, that's what I would say we should be required to vote on it.
Okay, Tom, since it's down
You know, I think I would probably stay with the policy as it stands until, or if I got information that made me think we needed to change it.
I am not certain what I know the policy to me is easier because we know what happens if you give the members an assessment or numbers they don't like. They go pretty crazy. So, you know, if people were very unhappy with what happened in the spring, and I think that resulted in the policy change. I don't know if a bylaw, somebody can help me, if you want to change a bylaw, does it have to go out to a vote? And you have to have a vote, and it costs money to do that, and whatever, a policy change was done at a meeting. So I think you have to think about the efficiency of doing that, because if I'm on the board, I'm not going to vote for an assessment that would, or I'm not going to impose an assessment. We can't. We've already made a policy change. So I guess if everybody, I think sometimes it has to get down into a matter of trust, and do you trust the people that are running the board to act in your best interest? But if it had to be a bylaw change, I would be okay with that.
Okay.
I just don't, I personally don't see with the change in the policy, I don't see the need to change the bylaws, but I'm not against it.
Okay, thank you. Henry?
To ensure that members have an opportunity to vote, I would support developing a change in the bylaws and sending it out to the members to see what they want. I don't know what the people and members want, but I would certainly support them looking into this. I would support.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
You know, for a number of years, I was a lobbyist for various organizations, and there's a big deal difference between amending the law and changing a regulation. And as I understand it, the bylaw changes is a tremendously difficult and expensive thing, and very seldom do they get changed, because there's a lot of absentee votes here, and those absentee votes turn into no votes. So it's going to be a very difficult thing, even if we do get everybody to say, yes, this is the magic number over which you must have a vote. If you put it into the bylaws, and somebody wants to change it, saying, oh, it should be lower because we're strapped and we can't react quickly, etc., then magically, the people who just don't really care and don't vote, they're stopping it. So I think the policy that was changed is fair at the moment. I'd have to be given information that says this is the right number for an organization of your size, looking to the future and the cost of things that have to be done. But I would not right away tell you that, I certainly wouldn't tell you $250,000 is a bylaw change for me.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
I'm not really shy anyway. This is a question for Mr. Duxman. Is it true, just a yes or no answer, that a board member came to your house to let you know that you were not going to be endorsed and that you could withdraw if you wanted to?
Yes. I was informed that I was not going to be endorsed by the nominating committee because I had not been on any of the committees. So someone came to my house and told me this, and they said that gives you the opportunity to withdraw. I was not going to withdraw because I feel like I have been on a lot of boards and can contribute to the operation of Stonebridge.
Next. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Now we'll go into final comments. We're nowhere near done, Kevin. Sit down.
Trying to run away.
Could you pass the microphone down this way? And we'll start with Tom.
Okay. Well, I would first like to thank everybody for the opportunity here to respond to your questions. I mean, obviously our community is a very diverse group with diverse opinions. I think we all have in our heart the best for Stonebridge in our mind, and you know, probably the best qualification that I have for this job is that I come to this with no real personal or preconceived agenda other than for the success, the ongoing success of our community here. My intention would be to listen, understand issues, and try to make the best vote I could on decisions that had to be made at the board level. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Don?
My belief is the membership and Stonebridge should be interested in board members who will provide leadership and who are willing to and able to address the desires and interests of the membership. I mean, primarily you're electing us to come up here, lead you, and listen to your input and guide you along. So just because we're elected, whoever it is, they should continue to listen. And that's one of the things I think is important. I also believe business experiences and outside board experiences are important. My life up until now had commitments outside of Stonebridge. I had a 5-year commitment to be on the board of a yacht club. And I went through different boards and different positions that required a lot of my time. That's why I wasn't here. And even when I was here, I was doing stuff for the yacht club. So it was kind of difficult for me at that point in time to get involved in Stonebridge. As that's wound down, and members have come to me personally and said, we'd like you to get on the board and run for the board and represent us and help us out, I've made a decision to do that. And like I said, when I ran my petition, in about a week's time, I got 20% of the membership signing my petition. So that was kind of a rallying cry to me that people were interested in my running for the board. So I'm going to run for the board, and I really want to thank everybody who signed the petition, and I encourage everybody else to vote for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Don. Gail?
Neighbors and friends, thank you for the opportunity to come out today and learn about our candidacies. I really appreciate the questions and your comments. One of the things I learned from my years working in marketing and brands is that no matter what you do, about half the people love it and about half the people hate it. And everybody else is somewhere in the middle of that. And so I've learned how to navigate through all that and really come to trying to resolve conflicts, navigate the waters, get to the best possible decision for everyone. We like to say it's about 80% consensus, because everybody doesn't always love every little piece of every little thing that happens, but it's 100% alignment. And that was always our goal. Once a decision was made, that people would honor those decisions. So I would like to be part of the team that's going to be based and focused on this effort, so I'm asking for your vote at this time. If anybody has any further questions for me, I'd be happy to stay afterwards and answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you, Gail. Henry?
I also requested your vote. I think I have vast experience on boards. I spent many years being a board member. I started at General Mills as an auditor, ended up as director of state taxes. I was on a national board for 25 years, located in Washington, D.C., that worked on state tax issues for the various states. They put on seminars on tax policy. We lobbied different states for good tax policy, and I was chairman of that organization that started out with a little over 100 corporations, and there were over 500 corporations in cost at the time that I left. Some of the things that I have accomplished is I was president of the Lions Club in Cross Lake, Minnesota, and we raised money to start a new library. I was also trustee and treasurer of a local church in Cross Lake, and we built an $8.5 million church. I put together a several-year proposal on receipts and disbursements and used that to convince the bishop that we should move ahead with building. Fortunately, receipts came in faster, and a couple of years after we built the church, it was paid off. I started on the city council in Elk River when we went from 2 square miles to 34 square miles. We had to hire pretty much all new employees, and to put in new ordinances, which the mayor and I basically wrote at that time. I was off for 8 years, and I came back as mayor until I moved out of town. And during those times, we needed commercial area. I was instrumental in rezoning 3 areas of the city for commercial enterprise. And also brought manufacturing into the city with economic development. I was on the Electric Utility Commission, and we used to generate all the power needed by the city of Elk River, but we negotiated and purchased electricity from other utilities, and therefore with our generation we were back up, and therefore we got a lower rate. I see that I've run out of time, so I would like to give you some of the other things that I was able to accomplish.
Thank you, Henry. Jim?
Thanks, everybody, for coming. You know, self-government is really a difficult and time-consuming job, so I appreciate everybody coming to listen and try to make an informed decision. I believe strongly that the strength of any volunteer organization is really enhanced by the clarity of the group's mission and the sharpness of its focus, excuse me, in attaining its goals. When I ran the Savings Banks Association in Pennsylvania, my first job was to build a consensus among the bank presidents. I needed to make sure that we were clear about what we wanted and that we spoke with one voice. If elected, I will approach every issue with an open mind and critically analyze the consequences of every decision that we are asked to make. We all must work together to understand everything we can about every issue. And once decisions are reached, we must work just as hard to communicate how and why we reach those decisions. If we do that, we'll do well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. All right, so now I realize that I am between you and a cocktail, but I need to take a few more minutes to briefly address the candidate letter that was sent by 3 candidates to many Stonebridge members last week. The letter falsely accuses the current board of 3 specific positions. First, they assert that the board discourages open elections and dissuades members from running. We have 6 candidates this year for 3 open positions, so that is certainly an open election. The governing documents require an open election, and the board has never and would never keep someone from running. The nominating committee may not recommend all of the candidates that are running, but that is not dissuading a member from running. It's fulfilling their responsibility under the governing documents. Second, they assert that the board opposes member votes on capital projects. We discussed this a little bit here. Henry said that we had changed the bylaws to be able to do capital projects without a vote. That's not true. But what we did do was impose a policy recently that requires a member vote on all capital projects over a certain amount. This is certainly not a board that opposes a member vote. As board president, I believe it's incumbent on me to refute the false accusations made in the candidate's letter so the election can be conducted in a fair and factual manner. To that end, an email from me will be sent to all members this evening that discusses each of these accusations in more detail. Last thing I'd like to talk about, which was brought up earlier today, was the survey. We will have a member survey, which will go out on February 15th. This is the one that we do every 3 years, and it's all-encompassing. It's like 140 questions. Many of us have taken it already, but it only takes more than 15 minutes or so to take. So I would encourage everyone to take the survey. It'll run till March 1st, and then we'll have a town hall meeting in April where the consultant will come back and go through the results. And Tim has come up with some very nice incentives, free dinner for 2 type of thing. From a drawing that'll be done every 4 days throughout the survey process. So the sooner you enter your survey and do the response, the sooner that more times you will be eligible for the drawing. So you should do the survey as soon as you can. So on behalf of the nominating committee, I would like to thank all the members who attended today's forum. And please join me in thanking the candidates for their participation today. And voting begins tomorrow. Thank you for coming, and the bar is now open.